July can be a challenging month, but if you know what to throw, you can have some of the best fishing of the whole year. I love fishing during the warmer months because of how active the fish are and how aggressive they are. Also, you can catch them on many different presentations. Whenever it comes to selecting lures to use in July, it is important to think about where the bass are at on your local body of water. During the warmer months, bass will be a mix of up shallow and relating to structure in deeper water. It was very difficult to select just 5 lures to talk about for the month, so I decided to add a bonus lure. These lures will work in many situations throughout the country and catch some giants in July. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with my top 5 baits to use in July in the comment section down below. Also, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. We are on the way to 5K by the end of the year, and I'd love to have you join the community. At the time of recording this video, we're at 2,340 some subs, and I really appreciate all the support you guys have given me. It really does mean a lot, and I know we can hit 5K by the end of the year. So if you're not already subscribed, please make sure you do. The first lure I'm going to talk about today is the jig. The jig is probably one of my favorite lures to throw all year. A jig can produce some huge bites and is one of my confident baits to catch big bass. This time of year, I like to throw 2 different styles of jigs. The first one I like to throw is a football jig. During this time of year, bass will relate to deeper water more often than not, and this is where the football jig shines. You can catch some good bass this time of year targeting ledges, deep points, and offshore structure that you can find on your fish finder. The second style jig I like is a punching jig. I have recently got into punching jigs over the past year, and I truly regret not getting into them sooner. Punching jigs shine around thick vegetation, and you can pull some massive bass out of it. A jig is a very versatile lure and can be fished in many different scenarios depending on where you are fishing at in the country. Don't think the jig can only be used in deeper water. It works well up shallow too. It's all really dependent on what type of structure you are fishing around. There's many different types of jigs and trailers to use and can become overwhelming. I plan on doing a more in-depth video talking about jigs in the near future, so make sure if you want to see that, comment down below and let me know. The jig can also be fished in many different scenarios around rocks, vegetation, and different types of structure depending on what style jig head you are using. The drawing power of a larger profile jig can result in some huge bites during July and can potentially catch your next personal best bass. The second lure I wanted to talk about today is the Dropshot. Whenever the bite gets tough on these blistering hot summer days, I will pick up a Dropshot more times than not. There's something about just fishing a Dropshot that the bass cannot resist this time of year, or any time of year for that matter. The 2 most important things to consider when you're fishing a Dropshot is the plastic you're using and what type of hook you use. Whenever choosing what plastic to use, it is important to consider the type of forage in the body of water that you are fishing for that day. I like to match the hatch so I can get more bites while I'm out on the water, and it is a good rule of thumb to go by. Whenever it comes to selecting a hook and how you're going to rig it, it is important to consider what type of structure you're going to be fishing around for that day. If you are going to be fishing around a lot of wood, for example, you might want to Texas rig your soft plastic just so it doesn't get hung up as much. Most of the time, I personally like to nose hook mine with a smaller wire hook because it gives the soft plastic a lot of action whenever you move your rod tip. The Dropshot shines in many different types of condition and just straight up catches big fish. The third lure I'm going to talk about today is topwater lures. I decided to keep this one pretty broad just because of the different style of topwater baits and how they excel in many different conditions, and it really depends on what type of structure you are fishing around. It depends if you're fishing around rocks, grass, timber, or in open water. A good topwater bite is very addicting and catches some giants during the summer, and is one of the most addictive. Generally, bass will be more likely to hit topwater early in the morning and late in the evening at dusk. However, there are times when topwater will work all day long and is one of the best bites in my opinion. Generally, I like to throw topwater on days with some overcast, but remember, bass fishing is not an exact science and it will work in other times as well. Let me know down below what your favorite style topwater bait is. It was hard to select just 5 lures, so I decided to add a bonus lure onto the list. The bonus lure I'm going to talk about today is the Texas rig. The Texas rig is a good choice this time of year because of how many different presentations you can do with this rig, depending on if you peg your weight, the plastic you use as your trailer, and the weight you decide to use. Personally, this time of year, I like to use creature style soft plastics and ribbon tail worms However, make sure you experiment with the Texas rig to figure out what to imitate and what works best for you in your local body of water. For example, if you have thick grass or pads up shallow, you can choose a 1 ounce weight and a creature style bait to target the bass that will be holding under the grass. Here in West North Carolina, we fish around a lot of rocks and timber, so I can get away with a much lighter weight generally. The Texas rig can be an effective lure, especially when going to a new body of water. Bass will often relate to structure, so throwing a weedless lure like the Texas rig works very well. Many people love to use the Texas rig because of how well it comes through cover due to exposing the hook. Personally, I like to peg the weight on my Texas rig so it does not get hung up as much, but it really depends on where you're at in the country and around what type of structure you are fishing around. Many people will not peg their weight, so it truly comes down to personal preference. No matter which way you go about it, pegging the weight or not pegging the weight will change the action of your Texas rig, and some days the bass will want it pegged, and on other days, they won't want it pegged, and you're just going to have to experiment with that. The Texas rig does well in both shallow and deeper water and is a great lure to use in July. The Texas rig really shines when the bass are relating close to cover, and this is my favorite time of the year to throw it. Many anglers like using a weightless Texas rig and can trigger more strikes in areas with higher pressure due to the more natural action of the Texas rig moving throughout the water column compared to if you had the weight in front of it. The Texas rig can be fished pretty much everywhere, no matter if the bass are shallow or relating to deeper water. The Texas rig will catch them. You can change up the retrieve too and fish the Texas rig with many different cadences. However, my favorite way to work the Texas rig is by dragging it slowly across the bottom or bringing it through structure. You can get some nice sized bass doing this, and is one of the most versatile lures on this list with how many different ways you can rig it and fish the Texas rig. If you are not throwing the Texas rig this time of year, you are missing out on one of the best rigs to throw around structure. The fourth lure I'm going to talk about today is the Wacky Rig. The Wacky Rig is one of my favorite finesse techniques this time of year due to its larger profile in the water and how long it stays in the strike zone for. Whenever I am using a Wacky Rig, I am trying to imitate a bluegill because during the summer, every month, bluegill will go up and spawn every full moon. This is a quick and easy meal and can trigger some huge bass to bite. I especially love using a Wacky Rig when targeting largemouth bass, but also have success targeting spots and smallmouth with it. The Wacky Rig is a versatile rig due to how much you can change the presentation of it by changing up what type of worm you put on it. Depending on what type of worm you decide to use can determine at what rate your Wacky Rig will fall throughout the water column. For example, the Yum Digger is one of the slowest sinking worms that you can use, while the Gary Yamamoto Cinco will sink more quickly through the water column. Depending on the mood of the bass for that day will determine which soft plastic worm you should use that day. Sometimes they want a slower sinking worm, while other days they want a faster sinking worm. It is best to experiment and see what works well in your local body of water. The Wacky Rig can be fished in many different scenarios and shines whenever targeting shallow bass. Whenever I was down on Lake Guntersville throwing a Wacky Rig, no one else at the boat ramp was able to catch anything for that day. The anglers I talked to at the boat ramp said they were mainly power fishing, throwing chatterbaits and lipless crankbaits that day. I thought not many people would fish the Wacky Rig on Guntersville compared to other style of lures. This ended up paying off for me and I had a great day out on the water. Many people don't like to throw the Wacky Rig because they think that they will not catch a big bass. I am here to tell you that the Wacky Rig can catch some massive bass. Whenever I was on Lake Guntersville, I was catching all of my bass in less than a foot of water with the Wacky Rig. So don't be afraid to throw it up shallow. Whenever I see shallow water, one of the first lures that pops in my head is the Wacky Rig, especially whenever I need it to skip underneath something. I love to skip the Wacky Rig under docks or under branches hanging off the bank. Normally I will trigger a reaction strike once I skip it under different types of structure. It is one of my favorite lures to skip and is by far one of the easiest lures to skip in my opinion. If you do not have a Wacky Rig tied on this time of year, you are missing out on one of the best finesse baits for shallow bass. The fifth lure I want to talk about today is the Shaky Head. The Shaky Head is a productive lure to use this time of year, especially whenever the bite gets tough on these really hot summer days. The Shaky Head shines whenever you are fishing around different types of cover and can trigger some big bites. The Shaky Head is weedless, so you are able to fish it pretty much anywhere, and the Shaky Head catches some giant fish. There's two main styles styles of shaky heads that people use. The first style shaky head design is a ball head, which gives the bait a unique action by rocking back and forth when retrieved. The second shaky head design is a stand-up head, which gives the shaky head a completely different action compared to if you were using a ball head. The stand-up jig head is used around rocks mainly and does well here in western North Carolina. The ball head gives the lure a unique action working back and forth on the bottom. Most people will use a finesse worm when choosing what plastic to use. Most people will throw a shaky head on a spinning rod with light line. Personally, I like to use 8-pound test whenever I'm fishing a shaky head, but I fish in really clear water, so it really comes down to personal preference. The shaky head truly shines this time of year and can produce some huge bites, especially if you're throwing it in the right place. Whenever you're out this month, make sure you have a shaky head tied on. You will not regret it. These are my top 5 lures to use in July, and these lures will help you catch more bass whenever you are fishing this month. It was hard to select just 5 lures and a bonus lure for the month, but these lures will work in many different scenarios across the country. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below. Also, let me know if you agree or disagree with my top 5 July lures, or if I missed your favorite lure to use this time of year. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button to help the video in the YouTube algorithm so more people can get recommended this video. If you are not subscribed, I would love to have you join the community, and if you made it this far in the video, you definitely should. If you want to check out one of the best days I had fishing for smallmouth, make sure you check out this video right here.